How many in here have a Lego set at home? Nice. Thank you for joining. We're here today to say hi and tell a bit about what we do in Lego. So, a short story here. Mads and I both have 3 wonderful kids at home. And every week we bring back home 1 Lego set, 2 Lego sets, and they just tear up the box and they start building, completely ignoring age restrictions. They just dive straight into it because they feel so extremely empowered. Oh, sorry. And they're brave. They're very, very brave because they feel they can go in and build whatever they envision. They don't realize that the Lego brick is actually designed with constraints. So the Lego brick is designed with enough constraints to just make sure that they can enable limitless creativity. It was actually conceived back in the 50s, where the concept of system in play was founded. And here's a little quote, taking from the concept. So, the toy has to be compact in its dimensions without limiting the free expression of imagination. And that's exactly what happens when the kids pick up the bricks, because they believe they can create anything they can imagine, which is super wonderful, and it's awesome to watch when they materialize their dreams right in front of you on the table. So, those of you who have kids, how many have kids? You will know that when they're small, they play alone, and when they grow, they start to involve their friends. And they do that because when they share the experience with their friends, they enhance the experience, the value becomes bigger, they collaborate, and they build friendships, which is super central. So sharing limitlessly is what they do, and when they do that, they cultivate empathy, okay? So that is the foundation for the next play date. So one day they play, next day they have a new play date because they had such a good experience. And it's the same thing with the cycle of sharing and collaborating that happens with the Lego brick. It's what it's intended for. So the reusable Lego brick, you will see again and again. And here you have my bricks back from the 70s, those of you who remember them. This one is a minifig, the original minifig. It still fits perfectly today into the sunflowers that my kids are assembling at home these days, which is pretty awesome. And that's because the interface is so easy to use, and that is a fundamental constraint that enables creativity. So the kids can go out and create anything they envision, and they can share with their friends in minutes. This is Mads. My name is Christian. We are lead engineer / product managers in the Lego group, and we work with Kubernetes. We offer our services on Kubernetes-based platforms to about 250 product teams at the Lego group, purely internally. And we believe that the Lego brick, the platform, should mimic the features of the Lego brick, and that is the premise for this talk. So we can ask ourselves, last year, Daniel Bryant gave a talk where he introduced the concept of the golden brick as a metaphor for platforms. We really like that, not just because he used the term brick, but it really resonates with what we're doing. And in the talk, he didn't compare the paved path and the golden bricks as we're doing now, but the thing that we really appreciate about the golden brick compared to the paved path is that we see the difference lying in how we approach and communicate the balance between creativity and freedom of choice for our platforms, right? So building a golden brick, aka a platform, that is hard. It requires technical skill, and it requires understanding of the user's context. So the golden brick term is a bit different. It changes a lot because golden bricks is something you can pick up, so it's optional to use, whereas you also have to develop it close in collaboration with your users, because they trust you, they empower you to essentially make the hard choices on your behalf, right? Which is pretty cool. They trust you to find just the right amount of constraints so they can be enabled to do limitless creativity with the platform. And then the balance is really to figure out what is good enough for a golden brick, what is good enough for a platform, striking the balance between where do we add a new constraint, how do we add or remove constraints, when do we collaborate, how and when do we collaborate. So let's take an example and look at the engineer's everyday life. A thing that is abundance every day, most will rely to, is the fact that they have choices, daunting choices they have to make every single day. And in a company like Lego, we have tons of best practices, tools, and compliance considerations that we have to consider and weigh when we make a choice, which is pretty hard. So therefore, the Lego group have made a couple of guidelines, and one of these guidelines is the API first guideline. So APIs are there to decouple, and they're crucial for us because they decouple the implementation details from the consumers, and most of us already know this. But if you take it a bit up and you consider the golden brick here as representing the platform, and the studs of the brick representing the APIs, then you kind of get the modularity, how easy it is to stack them on top of each other, right, and use them for building. So we deliver our platforms using our APIs, which means that just like the kids, they can build whatever they want, so can the engineers, and they're enabled, but they are actually adhering to our constraints, which are the studs of the Lego brick. Point being that the interface, the API, is our main interface to our platforms for ourselves and for our users. We're dog feeding ourselves, right? This gives the users the feeling of empowerment because they can use every single function of the platform as they see fit, while we handle all the operational details and maintenance below. So if you imagine that your company has multiple platforms with multiple APIs, you end up with a self-service vending machine for product teams where they can go in and pick whatever brick they want to their product and add them to their product or their service at will. And this freedom of choice is super important to note. So with the freedom of choice, they can do whatever they want. They can combine Lego bricks as they see fit, do experiments, and they can do them fast, they can do them quick, and then they will discover that, of course, they have constraints, just like we designed them to have. And when they discover the constraints, they will be enabled to challenge it, and they will be enabled to give us feedback, and this is the way that we improve our APIs. We very strongly rely on the feedback for this. But building platforms and building APIs requires a lot of work. It is super hard for a platform team to do this. You have to be experts in the technical foundation of the entire platform. You have to be experts in the developer experience, and you have to be experts in the needs of your users, right? Because that is required for you to make it a success for them. That is super hard work. So even for the toughest engineers, so let's say you go into a meeting and you're celebrating your latest feature with your couple of product teams, and they're so happy. You go out, you go into the next meeting. In the next meeting, you sit with another product team, and they're mad because they find a new feature limiting. Okay, this happened quite a lot for us. Or another situation here, you go from the meeting where everybody is celebrating into the next meeting, and you are being told from your colleagues that they found a new perfect technology to replace whatever you just did today. Happens all the time. So what we do is we refine our constraints over and over. We relook our designs with our colleagues, dive in, try to make it better. A real example of this, as I told you, we offer Kubernetes as a service. So we have runtimes as a service, which is essentially a managed namespace in a shared Kubernetes cluster with a lot of super cool features. The first constraint, two constraints they will meet, is the fact that we use Argo CD and the fact that you have no access to the Kube API. We did this to ensure control over the cluster state, which makes perfect sense when you look at someone who wants to make sure that everything can run all the time, 24/7, right? Easy to reproduce. So we have created a creative sandbox for them in which they can play as long as they adhere to the rules that we have defined. But guess what? One size doesn't fit all. Engineers, they don't like to be constrained, right? They are creative, they have to be free. It's super important for them to be able to look under the hood, understand what goes on beneath, and it's super important for them to be able to solve their own issues. So what they wanted, this is of course a real story, they wanted Kube API access. Initially, when we launched this, we were aware of the fact that someone would want it, but we didn't really get a lot of feedback of how many people wanted it. So we just said, well, it's not needed. No, there's no value in it. We just go the way we always done. Time goes by, and then we figure out that suddenly in our service channel, we are solving a lot of issues that the engineers should be able to solve themselves. That's not good. And then at the same time, in the small meetings we have in our enablement teams, when we go out to the product teams, they tell us, we really don't like it. We feel you're constraining us. We want to break free. Therefore, we went into a dialogue with them, of course. We created an experiment. We talked to our sister teams. We talked to our departments. And then we tried to find a solution to alleviate our shared pain. In came what we call the Zero Trust Proxy. The Zero Trust Proxy is an extension of our API that allows access to the Kube API using OIDC. I think I said that one correctly. What it does is it gives you access to the Kube API, but you only have operational access, so you can't mess up the cluster state. That is still completely under control. So what they have now, together with us, we have a transparent view into our shared engine room, that is Kubernetes in this case, right? And our engineers are so much happier because now they're capable of solving issues themselves, and we talk about the same facts. And we did this simply by adjusting the constraints of the golden brick and the APIs of our platform. This goes to illustrate how a change, how we started out with the idea, a good idea about ensuring cluster state, ended up being our users being delayed, us doing tedious work. And by doing the experiment together with them, we ended up with finding a solution to a mutual problem, saving time, increasing our trust, and increasing our trust of our local community. It simply also illustrates the fact that we have a shared responsibility to collaborate on the technical aspects of the products we deliver, to ensure that everyone has something fun to play with. So the constraints, the sandbox is still the constraint where we have to strike the right balance of features and constraints for all our product teams, including ourselves. And this is super important when you go into big companies and you have multiple APIs, multiple platforms, because it can run completely amok. So this is a Lego terminology you will see if you visit Lego House. If you have 6 2x4 golden bricks, then you have 915 million different ways to combine them. If you take that analogy and put it on 6 APIs, you are pretty sure and convinced very fast that you need to take very good care of refining the constraints of your APIs and your platform. Cool. Over to you, Mads.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the human aspect of platform engineering. Because, I mean, the tech is awesome, right? There's all the YAML, there's the controllers, Kubernetes, all of that. But in the end, we build platforms in order to enable humans to work together. So Christian just gave the awesome analogy of kids and this creativity that they have. And we should definitely remember whenever we enable engineers that it's about creativity. But in the end, even though they sometimes might behave as such, engineers are not necessarily kids, right? So we need another term. And one of the terms we really like to use is the term of a colleague. And one of the reasons we like this term is that it's a professional setting, and colleagues usually share a common goal, right? The organization you're in have a goal, and you share this goal. And this means that you are agreeing on why you're doing a specific thing. Okay, but why is this important for platform engineering? Well, in platform engineering, we are building services for end users. And these services need to have a number of constraints. You need to say yes, of course, when there's awesome things that you want to enable, but you also have to say no. And you actually have to say no way more than yes. The reason for this is that we want to set up these constraints that enables a lot of creativity, right? And this creativity is a dialogue that you do between you and your colleagues, right? It's super important whenever you then set up these constraints that they are shaping this service that you're building, and that you end up on this concept of being just good enough. So when you do that, you need this empathy. You need to be able to understand why your end users are doing what they're doing, and you need to have this shared empathy, right? So what we've discovered is that this is not something that just comes for free. This is something that you have to really enable and keep doing. One of the ways we do this is by leading by transparency. So one example is that, so for instance, my team are doing managed services for manufacturing. And when we do these services, we make sure that the metrics that we use are also accessible for the end users. This way, they can show what we are doing, and they can build up trust that way. Another thing we really like to do is to go and visit our colleagues in their setting, right? So we are lucky enough to be working for a company that are doing real manufacturing. So we can go and see the product being produced. There's nothing more trust building than going to a factory and having a colleague show you the machine that will break if your managed database stops working. The day where you're on call and something bad happens, you now have that strong bond to your colleague. And speaking about resiliency, we also like to go and explore the unknown together. So this could be if an end user is doubting whether or not your service is resilient, right? How fast is the failover? Well, if you sit down and design a chaos experiment together, you know that this person will trust your service way more. It's all about challenging these constraints and these boundaries you have in your service. A concrete example was when we were designing a managed cache service. So while doing this, we initially set out to build a cache service that was ephemeral, which meant that we wouldn't have persistence, we wouldn't have backup and restore, because that's the thing you need when you have persistence, right? And of course, when we did the first user interview, we discovered that this end user really wanted persistence. Okay, but why was that? At that point, we could just have rejected the user, but we then continued the conversation. And we then understood that actually they were using this cache slightly as a database. There were some maintenance windows where a downstream service would not be able to pick up some data. And while that system was under maintenance, this system will be the single source of truth. So again, this works like a database, right? Okay, but then we sat down, then talked to them, and then said, well, we won't be able to do good disaster recovery for you if we're going to do this thing. And they ended up saying, well, actually, during a disaster, will only take us about an hour or so to get up and running again if we have to reconstruct this data. So that's actually fine. So in other words, we reached this shared understanding between ourselves, right? And this is what's super important when you have this empathy between you and your end users. It is a balance. You can't always say yes, you need to say no. But having a good, empathetic relation means that you're able to take this conversation. So in the end, it's about constraining to what is good enough. And we have this model for this. In this model, and of course it's a brick build, we have good enough that we've talked about in the middle, and this is where you want your end users to be. But we also have these areas in the top and the bottom where you definitely don't want your end users to be. These are either things that are too low level or things that are so far into the future that it's just not possible to do. But what you want to enable is for your end users to also enter the zone of things that are actually possible. It's not possible today, but maybe there's a constraint you can push here. So to reiterate, you have this model, there's constraints, and you then realize that there are user needs that will change over time. When those things changes, you have the choice of whether or not you need to adjust, right? You don't have to do it, but you're just aware that this is the thing you can do. And this is the creative sandbox, right? You have the area where you can work within, and then the area where you can dream. Then starting to wrap up.
Oh, yes. So your team culture has a huge impact on your products and your users. They observe you. So what is it that you want them to see? We want them to see and relate to the people they meet every day who are helping them out in the service channel. We want to know their names and their faces so they know they're safe. Are your users empowered to shine? Well, for us, that is all about getting into the context with them, understanding, sitting right next to their keyboard, understanding their problems, so we understand the path to their success, because their success is our success. Are they being heard? What do we do? Well, we have small, intimate meetings with each product team instead of a whole group of product teams, where we create a safe space for them, where they can share their constraints, their worries, and also their dreams. More importantly, so their dreams. So we can catch them and we can use them to live up to the next level of our platform.
Yeah, and also, are you challenging those boundaries? So there's the upper boundary, of course, but also remember that when you do that, you expand the scope of your service, which will increase the cognitive load of your teams. So are you also raising that lower boundary of things that you don't want your end users to care about? And in the end, ask yourself whether you are paving the path ahead of your end users, not consulting them, or whether you are handing them the bricks that they need to build their paved path. And with that, we would like to thank some people who have inspired us. As Christian mentioned, Daniel Bryant gave us the idea of the golden brick, Camille, Ian, and Gregor for all their awesome writing. And of course, we would like to thank all of you. Find us online or in person. If you find us in person and have a good story about platform engineering, we might have something for you. Thank you all.